Good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Ashok. I represent Intel Technologies. You'd be wondering what Intel is doing when it comes to healthcare, because we are inside the computer. We normally don't seem to be found anywhere else outside. But you'll be pretty surprised to see why we are there and what we could actually be doing. I tend to chair, I'm chairing the session, but the idea of this entire session is not to talk about what we are doing, but more in terms of what is it that is needed on the ground so that we can actually come out with the discussion. I would request, including myself, I'll try and restrict myself to around 12 odd minutes so that we can get all people on the stage as speakers, and we'll have questions for the last 15 minutes odd. So with that, I just want to talk about the various panel members. We've got a very distinguished panel over here. So they will do their introductions themselves, or I will have Dr. over here to do the introductions of them. So where does Intel come in on this entire paradigm? We basically are having a program called the World Ahead Program, which is basically to promote the access of technology to enrich the lives of people. So that's basically touching the next billion population with technology. So it could be broadband, it could be technology in whichever form it is. From there, we drill down to saying that, okay, what can we do from a healthcare perspective? And on the healthcare, access to healthcare being the largest problem, we started looking at what could be done from a medical technology standpoint, be it on the standard side, or be it in terms of what's needed on the ground at the last mile of healthcare delivery, which could transform the way in which healthcare is being done. So I'll drill down further. I mean, this is the way in which we narrow down, because healthcare is a huge problem. Rural healthcare, if you look at that definition, I could talk about anything. So we've narrowed it down further and said that let's talk about the health workers, which are right down over there in the field, the ANMs, who are providing care to the villages in India. The same definition, I mean, the reason why we took this as a problem statement is because you call them ANMs here. They are called barangay workers in Philippines. They are called community health workers in Vietnam. It's the same set of people, the same roles, responsibilities worldwide. All of them have these problems. So it's a common problem across the world, which we are trying to see and how we can address this. So we look at it as a four-pillar kind of a problem statement over here. One is the data acquisition and analytics. Close to around 70% of the time of a health worker is spent on collecting data, which they have no clue about, why they are collecting it, nor do they use it. Okay, so they collect it because they're told to collect it, and they basically pass it on to the health system. The second part is how many of these people actually get trained. If you're looking at training and assessment of health workers which are in service, yes, in the pre-service side, you would have a lot of trainings which are provided prior to them coming into the field. But once they are deployed in the field, you have enormous number of trainings, okay? When we did if you put that chart which shows a scheduler and you put a map over there, you'll see that there will be every single day there'll be some training or the other. Is it effective, and is it really helping in trying to improve the outcomes? And is that the best way of providing training, which is why we've started looking at alternative means of providing training. The next part is these health workers become the conduits of information which is going out to both the ASHA, which is the person in the village, it's going to the community, as well as for their own benefit. So how can that information, the quality of the information, remain the same across all these people? And the last is field-based diagnostic. If a health worker comes across, say, a pregnant woman, she needs to measure, say, the weight, the hemoglobin, say, blood pressure, and a few other parameters. Can that be done on the same platform? So we started looking at it as an architectural problem and looked at it in terms of, can we try and address a common platform which can address these four challenges? We've started work around this. We are not a software company. We would be more than happy if someone over here in the industry volunteers and says that we do this. But what we are looking at over here is an open access, no license kind of a software, which would be handed over to the government so that they can actually run that. So whatever we are doing over here is a royalty-free open access platform, and the technologies we use for it would be in that line. What's the end deliverable, what we are visualizing? The end deliverable is we want to see that the health worker who's collecting this data from 21 odd registers, in India it varies from state to state in India, but they are close to around 21 odd registers. They have no clue why, I mean they collect it, there's close to around 60% redundancy of the data which they're collecting across these registers. And the information which they capture is just being fed upwards. But if we could give them graphical representation of usage of that data, so we are working not alone because we are not public health experts, we are technology people who can talk about architecture, we can help in building these kind of platforms, but we need domain experts. So we're working with the likes of IIPH as well as International Institute of Population Science to get us the algorithms which could be used in making this data useful. We also are working with various other players to try, for example, the GIS maps. You'd say that GIS maps are heavy. It can't work. The entire system, what we are looking at here, at a village level, would remain offline. The intent is to look at occasionally connected. As and when the person comes to a location where there is connectivity, it could be a Gram Panchayat office, it could be a PHC, it could be wherever, a community service center. Wherever there's connectivity, if they come in over there and connect in, it should synchronize not just the data upwards, but it should also push down data downwards, which is on the training and assessment side. So I'll just take it to the next stage, which is here's basically an example of what we are doing on the education side. Now, this is a platform called the School Healthcare Education Platform. This has been built with a very specific purpose in mind for the field level health workers. We've done a whole lot of activity on the education space, which is for the K-12 side of it, and we have a school platform which is trademarked for the education side. We changed that, repurposed this entire thing to build in it the offline capacity. We also built in the assessments. So you could actually do a quiz in an offline way to do this thing. Yes, there are a number of other platforms which are available. We did an evaluation of that. We love Moodle, okay, which is an open source as well. But what we found is that you need to have a user interface which is extremely simple. There should be not more than 2 or 3 actions which a health worker at this level, I mean, you're talking about 10th grade to 12th grade students. I mean, there would be 20 to 25-year-old or 60-plus kind of people which are there. So based on the categories which are there, we are looking at simplicity of usage. So this is something which Intel made a commitment at the United Nations earlier in September. This is basically to say that we will enable 1 million plus healthcare workers in developing countries with technology education tools and 21st century skills by 2015. We can't do this alone. We have to do it with countries, with ministries of health, with development agencies. The first country to sign up to that is Sri Lanka. You could actually go to that website, which is the Every Woman, Every Child website, where the commitments are officially put up at the UN site. And you'll see both Intel's commitment there as well as the Sri Lankan government commitment. They're talking about training their 100,000 health workers using the platform. And another thing is, when you talk telemedicine or you talk e-health strategy, do you have any way in which you can actually build basic competencies on ICT amongst the health workers? Currently, that itself is a challenge. Getting that basic competency, that should be a given if you're talking about any kind of transformation from an IT perspective. Another example over here is cardiac screening. This is an example which we're doing with Narayan Vidyalaya. You would have heard of their centers which are all over the place across the whole of India. And I suppose there will be some speakers from Narayan Vidyalaya who will be talking about this at a later point. I'm not here to talk about them. What we really like about this solution is the good practices part of it. One is you get a 15-minute response time on an ECG taken any time, 24/7. I have myself actually, the first installation which we did with them was in 2006. This was in Rui in Baramati. We've done several others across the state. We did this in a district called Davangere in Karnataka, okay, which is around 280 kilometers off Bangalore, because again, our headquarters is in Bangalore. What we found is we've deployed it across all public health centers. Okay, this is government, not what Narendra Tele is doing is in the private side. But imagine government health centers at the public side using the system and making it effective. There was a review committee which was sent in. I'll just show you a quick video. Hopefully it works.
I have been here from last June 2010. After coming here, I came to know that there is telemedicine facility in Ankodu and Harihara, and I was very happy about it. They have started the telemedicine facility in January 2009 with the help of Government of Karnataka and Intel.
This telemedicine project was started in Davangere Taluk, Davangere district in the year 2009, and so far over a period of 34 months, we have recorded nearly 976 ECGs, out of which nearly 20 ECGs were found to be abnormal, and they were referred to higher center for further intervention. One person has undergone surgery at JL Hospital for some cardiac problem.
ನಾನು ಮೈಯಾಗ ಆರಾಮಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರು ಭೇಟಿಯಾಗಿ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇ ಸಿ ಸಿ ಮಾಡಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಇ ಸಿ ಸಿ ಮಾಡಿಸಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊತ್ತು ಬಿಟ್ಟ ಮೇಲೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ನೀವು ಕೂಡಲೇ ದಾವಣಗೆರೆಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ನಮ್ಮ ಹುಡುಗ ಬರೋವರೆಗೂ ನಾನು ಕಾದಿದ್ದು ನಾವು ದಾವಣಗೆರೆಗೆ ಹೋದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಅಡ್ಮಿಟೇ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯಸ್ಥ ಡಾಕ್ಟ್ರು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಏನಂತ ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗಲ್ಲ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದು ಕೂಡಲೇ ನಾವು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಹೋದ್ವಿ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಆಪರೇಷನ್ ಈಗ ನಾನು ಪೂರ ಆರಾಮಾಗ.
It will be very difficult for the village peoples in the remote areas to get the consultation by the specialty doctors. The patients are benefited by taking ECG and getting the free consultation and treatment guidance from the specialty doctors within no time.
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇ ಸಿ ಸಿ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ಪೂರ ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಹೋಗಿದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ದಾವಣಗೆರೆಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಯ್ತು, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗ್ತದೋ ಏನೋ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕಾಗ್ತದ. ಯಾಕಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ
in the interest of time, I'm going to cut this down. Okay. A couple of points over here before that is it's not just about the 15-minute time lag over there. How do they actually manage to get this 15 minutes? It's the back end, which is the workflow which they've managed to set up. You cannot afford to put a telemedicine room and expect doctors to come there. This is basically pushing the workflow from the telemedicine room. There is a server, but it gets pushed out to the ICU. And in the ICU, you always have a cardiologist who gets it based on the workload. And that's how they respond with this kind of thing. The affordability part of it comes in by, the cost of an ECG to actually do this thing is sub 25 rupees. So it's basically an extremely affordable solution when it comes down to running something like this. I'll just take a minute about standards. We have a number of devices over here, but how many of them actually are interoperable? I wanted to pose this actually in the previous session when you were talking about Nokia tools and you were talking about RIM. Will they talk on each other's platforms is what would be a good question to ask. Yes, Nokia is part of Continua. So is Intel, so is Qualcomm, so is Texas Instruments. This is a standards body which has been formed to ensure interoperability of data across medical devices. So the GEs of the world, the Siemens, the Roche Diagnostics, all of them are part of this. We're trying to have a session of this on the 13th, where we plan to call in a number of the Indian manufacturing companies to come in and look at it, evaluate, and see whether standards can actually help in scale. This would help a lot in terms of trying to do diagnostics right at the end. Some more learnings over here on the hub and spoke. I won't get into this thing, but the last part over there is expectations from a beneficiary at a telemedicine center. Trust is the most important thing. Without trust, the person is not going to go into that center. Quality of care is the second most important thing, and curative action. Because if a person comes in over there, he expects to get his diagnostics done, he expects to get his medicines at that location, and not just be consulted. So these are experiences based on one of our partners called World Health Partners. They have branded their hospitals. They have clinics, actually telemedicine clinics, across rural Uttar Pradesh, which is one of the most difficult terrains to do things. And we have seen that they've actually started looking at branded medication to avoid the case of spurious drugs. Measuring outcomes is critical. Whatever you do over here needs to have a very defined set of key performance indicators. Without that, you will never be able to define how you could actually see success of any given project. Here's a set of KPIs which we had done in a project in Nigeria called the Malafia project. It's on the website. I'll send you the links to that. In summary, do not consider movement to be progress. You could have a rocking horse which can keep moving, but you're not moving ahead anywhere. So what's important is that we have a number of successes in India to boast about, but they're not scaled large enough. You really need to start looking at how you could do it at scale. Start now for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok. We can have one or two questions on Mr. Ashok's presentation.
It is not part of CSR. It's part of the World Ahead Group. It's a sales and marketing activity. The reason why we are doing it is because there are 70 million health workers across the world, okay, which require technology to solve their problems. It's not just a India-specific solution. What we're doing is making architectural decisions which could be used replicably across countries. You saw the application which was there? That's being built by the solution architects from Intel currently, including the school healthcare platform as well as the other data analysis. You could visit our stalls, have a look at what's being done over there, because what we found is that partners are not interested in activating markets 2 or 3 years before they actually, I would say, mature. So we actually are doing things which will change the trend or move in that direction of activating markets.
Okay. Any other question?
Yeah, this is one.
Okay. Yeah.
Who is bearing the cost? Intel, government, and how is it being done? Online or is it being trained in centers?
Bearing the cost of the development is currently being done by Intel as well as its partners, not the government currently. However, when we give it out to the government, for example, in Sri Lanka, it would be given to the government, the application will go to them, they would need to look at it in terms of how do they deploy it. So the implementation of that would be something which they will figure out as to where do they get the monetary things for. They are in turn approaching development agencies, because what we see is that ICT to achieve MDG goals is something which is very critical. Yeah. And what we work with over here is something which we are also chairing up over there at the WHO level with partners for maternal child care. So PMNCH is what we are working with at the WHO level, as well as, for example, the content. We can build a platform. Without content, it's of no use, right? So for content, we are working with the UNFPA, we are working with Hesperian, a number of content providers who would provide the content, but you need to transform that content, which is on paper, into a digital format. So in my next session, which is in the other thing, you'll hear about capacity building.
And do you plan to keep on upgrading the technology and you'll be delivering the upgraded technology also?
The idea would be, when we say open access, the reason why we didn't call it open source, but called it open access, is because we would want to retain ownership so that any developments which happen across multiple countries can get fed back to a central place, which will be audited by the Intel architects, and then rolled out to the next countries which will want to adopt it.
Thank you.